call the meeting to order. Could we all please stand for the flag salute? New Jersey Open Public Meetings acted to ensure the right of the public to have the advance notice of and to attend the meeting of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Berlin Borough Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place published in the Courier Post and posted in the Berlin Community School, the Berlin Community School website, and Borough Hall. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Mrs. Del Palazzo?
Here.
Mr. Greenberg?
Here.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Here.
Mrs. Simone?
Here.
Mrs. Titus?
Here.
Mrs. Viscomi?
Here.
Mrs. Holland?
Here.
Mrs. Lewis?
Here.
Okay, Madam President, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Looking at student recognition, Dr. Campisi.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. Our Students of the Month. Student of the Month is an active listener and member of the community who continually strives for personal excellence and respects all staff, students, and community members by supporting the 6 pillars of character. Students of the Month contribute to an overall positive school environment. Those selected as Students of the Month serve as role models to their peers and should be extremely proud of their efforts and recognition. During a typical year, I'd have breakfast with the students, and we would have a ceremony here, and they would come up and get their certificate and everything like that. But due to everything going on with COVID, we're not doing that right now. But the administrative team, we're going to do something special for all of our Students of the Month and our Superintendent's Award later on this year. So we'll start with grade 5, Student of the Month, Gianna Raber. In grade 6, we have Bianca Leather. In grade 7, we have Josephine DeGraza Divine. And in grade 8, we have Ava Pfeiffer. And moving on to the Superintendent's Award. This month's Superintendent's Award goes to Madison Stewart. Madison is being recognized for her kindness, inclusivity, and bravery, for serving as a thought leader in class and embracing a unit that requires courageous conversation each and every day. We are so proud of your hard work and constant high performance. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of those students who were recognized as Students of the Month and the Superintendent's Award recipient. At this time, the sign-in sheet for participation in the public comment portion needs to be collected. Dr. Campisi, would you mind? Thank you. So, seeing no items listed under action items, we don't have a need for the first public participation section, so we will move on to item 2 for approval of the minutes. Could I have a motion and second for the approval of the Berlin Borough Board of Education minutes for October 28th, 2020, and that would be the public session minutes?
Motion.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Okay. I'm going to do correspondence before the presentation, just until she arrives. So looking at correspondence, we have a few letters that were sent to us this month. And let's see, pull them up. We have one from a student And that student is a minor, so I will not give that individual's name, but we have correspondence. So, dear Mrs. Lewis, I have decided to write a letter supporting the book Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. Through the past week or so, my mother has learned that multiple parents are very concerned about their children reading a book about racism and its history. So she asked me how I felt. I was upset to learn this, as I am enjoying this class and our classroom discussions. I find that as a student in 8th grade reading the book, it is very important to learn about racism and its history. Yes, the book does incorporate topics that might make me feel somewhat uncomfortable due to individuals previously making bad judgments, but that does not alter my opinion. The book does include white people who stood up against racism. The author said that it is important, very important, to note that there were also people along the way who stood up and fought against these ridiculously racist ideas with abolitionist ideas. And she quotes the author being on page 23 of the text. Through learning all the information in Ms. Gray's class, I find that she teaches us in a way that is very understanding of how we might be feeling. She is also accepting that it might make us slightly uncomfortable in having courageous conversations. She stops to ensure we understand what we are learning and takes a moment for us to ask questions if we have any. I also find that she selected this book in the first place to show us a different perspective because in history, we are learning about similar concepts but in a conventional way. In another book my mother is reading, the author explains college is frequently the first time students are exposed to a history of the United States that analyzes race in a critical way. Historical accounts have long reflected an attempt to sanitize this country's collective memories and downplay or eliminate understandings of our racist history. And that is a quote from, meaning that once students get to college, they are generally shown racism for the first time in a real way, not the light glazed over way that history books provide you. Ms. Gray, I believe, is giving us a light ease into the conversations about race. In the same book my mother is reading on the same page, the author states, this, being conversations about race, can be a jarring and difficult experience. And a page is quoted there as well as page 5. There is also the fact that as 8th graders about to enter Eastern, which has a diverse population, we should be exposed to how people of color view our history to be able to make connections, relationships, and etc. Also, the more you understand someone else's heritage, history, experiences, and viewpoints, the more you can have sympathy for people and be able to see through their eyes. I thank you for your time and attention on this matter. This subject is dear to my heart. Again, this is from an 8th grade student here at Berlin Community School. Correspondence. I apologize. I don't know why my mic keeps going. Your board members able. Another one that I could. Thanks. Thank you. Is that better? Hopefully that stays on for me. Okay. Dear board members, I am unable to attend the board meeting this Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. In lieu of my attendance of this upcoming board meeting, I ask that you present this letter as my testimony and public comment. I have written Dr. Campisi and the board several times as you have received my letters in the past. I have asked for several measures with regard to the book, Stamped, being taught by Ms. Gray, and have been either denied or ignored, as have many others. The concerns I have mentioned are below. Number 1, adherence to district policy for resource materials. Specifically number 2, which states, wherever possible, materials will provide major opposing views on controversial issues so that pupils may develop under guidance the practice of critical reading and thinking. Dr. Campisi replied to this concern by stating that this book is the opposing view. This is grossly incorrect, and one cannot expect youth who are very impressionable to be given only one view and to be able to determine the opposing view without another opposing text. Dr. Campisi also stated that he would be glad to consider other works that are opposing, yet he has not done that, and to this day, this book is the only novel that is being taught. Many parents, including myself, have cited several other works that can be taught in conjunction with Stamped that would allow the students to hear diverse voices and perspectives on this polemic topic. Number two, I had also asked for an alternate assignment to this highly controversial and leftist opinion book. Equity in education does not have to just be about race and white and black issues. This was also denied and told if my son does not complete this assignment, he would receive a 0. I believe the district should focus more on multicultural education through a lens of social justice to allow for fruitful discussion in class. There are national experts, such as Dr. Sonia Nieto and Dr. Patty Bode, who have written about the integration of diverse perspectives in a way that broadens perspective. Dr. Bode is an author, researcher, and teacher trainer. Number three, I also raised the concern that this book is not just an assignment, but an entire unit, which means another unit had to be deleted to include Stamped. I wanted to know what unit was deleted and why I was not given this information. Why were parents not notified of this major curriculum change? The choice of this so-called vetted and highly controversial book was not even mentioned to parents. No parents were asked to grant permission or to voice their concerns or contributions to the conversation. Why? Many had no idea it was even being taught. No parents were involved in the choosing of this book, nor students. There is no reading material process for approval at Berlin Community School whatsoever, and certainly not one that includes parents. The board approved this book, and we know that at least one board member admitted to never reading it. While this book may have been board approved, were the teaching materials approved or the Rogue Study Guide questions? As we now know, such questions were pulled and reworked. The only reason this was done is because a concerned parent happened to look over her son's shoulder and was appalled by the questions and shared them with the board, other concerned parents, and social media. The now reworking of the questions are because the teacher had been caught. How many other questions and materials were also just as unacceptable or worse? The damage to our children has already been done. Referring to rape and very political, let alone provocative and guided questions did not help create dialogue and free thinking, but rather made the students feel uncomfortable and unprepared to have such a conversation in class. They have not been taught how to have dialogue on such topics, and this needs to be a priority before introducing a brand new theme that can cause anxiety in our young students and in uncertain times. Unfortunately, any opportunity for productive conversation has already been ruined, and the ideal of this narrative taught as the only ideal. There have been multiple emails and phone calls written to Dr. Campisi, Mrs. Mawson, and the board, many of which were not shared with the board members, and many parents said to receive no email responses. Myself and many others not only feel ignored, but that what is being taught to our children is out of our control. It is very obvious and apparent by the way this book and its teachings were pushed through unbeknownst to the parents and without any other opposing view that this is a concerted effort to indoctrinate our children into your and the author's beliefs. Where is the board on this? Can you all sit silent while this occurs? At this point, the only reason I am allowing my son to continue is due to the fact that I do not want him to fail. I explained to him that this is an opinion-based book, not based on historical fact, and showed him where the author states this. I have had to show him the works by many minority authors that do not share in this view so that he can critically think for himself. What I do ask of the board today is to adhere to the district policy and to foster critical thinking by having these students finally see that there are opposing views to this narrative and ensure that they are taught such. I also ask that parents, and other stakeholders be part of a board-approved reading list that includes many books which promote social justice, racial equity, and perspective across the various ethnicities across the USA. It's also important that our children be given the opportunity to consider diverse perspectives on issues related to race, equity, and social justice to develop their critical thinking skills. And this correspondence was received and sent by Patricia Ferry. I have correspondence from Lauren Reel. To whom it concerns, I wanted to thank the Board of Education and Administration for approving and adding Stamped for an 8th grade reading assignment. I read the book, and I am familiar with the writer. I had no concerns. What I am concerned about is parents in the community finding issue with it. I appreciate that as public educators, you are including this much-needed perspective and history of racism in the classroom. Frankly, it's long overdue. Again, this is Lauren Reel, an 8th grade parent. We also have correspondence from Nicole Beal, who is also an 8th grade parent. Dear Berlin Community School Board of Education, I want to commend the Berlin Borough School for implementing the book Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Jason Reynolds in the 8th grade curriculum this year. It is imperative as an institution of education that BCS provides students the opportunity to engage in thinking and conversation about topics that are necessary and relevant to the world in which these students are navigating. Thank you for exposing them to current, award-winning literature that provides them the opportunity to think critically, reflect, and engage in discussions. Jason Reynolds has expressed that he wrote the book with the intent to empower students by being honest. He said, I want them to know that they have a place, that they have an obligation and responsibility, and that my love for them is hopefully shown by giving them this book to help them navigate these complex ideas. It is necessary to empower these students with the knowledge and ability to discuss, grapple with, and understand complex issues that exist in our society. I sincerely thank the board, Dr. Campisi, Mrs. Mawson, and Mrs. Gray for having the courage and passion to engage students in the current nonfiction literature that empowers them to think beyond their comfort zone, analyze, and discuss ideas that are complex. It is these things that make a student successful in their academic career as well as their contributions to society. I would also like to express how impressed I was with the Equity Town Hall that was held virtually earlier in the year. It was informative and interesting to listen to what the panelists had to say. I left the meeting feeling very proud of the direction that BCS is moving towards with teaching students equity. I think it is necessary to commend Mrs. Gray for her courage to challenge the students to step out of their comfort zone and present a topic that is difficult for adults and students to understand and grapple with. I would be remiss if I did not express my thoughts regarding Mrs. Gray. Mrs. Gray is an exemplar teacher. My son has had the honor of having her last year and this year. The dedication and commitment she puts into her lessons and the students is above and beyond. She has implemented innovative teaching and pedagogy that engages the students, differentiates, and encourages them to strive to improve. She has exposed my son to various texts that encouraged him to analyze and think critically. Mrs. Gray has encouraged him to be a better writer and always provides detailed, thoughtful, constructive comments to enhance and improve his writing. I have seen the copious feedback that she provides to each assignment. Mrs. Gray is always available to the students to address their questions as well as provide feedback. She has nurtured and ignited a passion and true enjoyment of learning, reading, and writing in my son. Mrs. Gray is rare and impressive. No other teacher has ignited such a passion or so much growth academically in any of my children. She goes on to quote Jason Reynolds from Stamped. What I've learned is that you're far more open and empathetic than the generations before you. So much so that your sensitivity is used as an insult, a slight against you. Your desire for a fair world is seen as a weakness. What I've learned is that your anger is global because the world now sits in the palm of your hand. You have the ability to teleport, to scroll upon a war zone or a murder, to witness protest and revolution from cultures not your own, but who share your frustration, your refusal, your fear. But I have to warn you, scrolling will never be enough. Reposting will never be enough. Hashtagging will never be enough. Because hatred has a way of convincing us half love is whole. What I mean by that is we, all of us, have to fight against performance and lean into participation. We have to be participants, active. We have to be more than audience members, sitting comfortably in the stands of morality, shouting wrong. That's too easy. Instead, we must be players on the field, on the court, in our classrooms and communities, trying to do right. Because it takes a whole hand, both hands, to grab hold of hatred. Not just a texting thumb and a scrolling index finger. But I have to warn you again, we can't attack a thing we don't know. That's dangerous and foolish. It would be like trying to chop down a tree from the top of it. If we understand how the tree works, how the trunk and roots are where the power lies, and how gravity is on our side, we can attack it, each of us with small axes, and change the face of the forest. That's Jason Reynolds, stamped. Again, that correspondence was from Nicole Beal. And last but certainly not least, we have correspondence from Mr. Robert Graham. Dear Mrs. Lewis, I am writing this letter as a show of support to the district and specifically Mrs. Gray for the use of the book stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You in the 8th grade ELA curriculum. It has come to my attention that there is concern among some members of the community, and I thought it prudent to point out that not everyone shares these views. As a direct result of the tumultuous times that we have experienced in the past several years, it's becoming commonplace for companies and institutions to adopt formalized training and awareness programs for the workforce to be better informed about the topics of diversity, equality, and inclusion. These trainings are meant to open the eyes of employees through sometimes difficult conversations about the way people of different backgrounds are viewed and treated. I've been through some of these programs at my place of work and feel we are a much stronger team of people as a result. Confronting topics such as unconscious bias and racism, while often trying, is very necessary to the well-being of our nation as a whole. By introducing the ideas of racism to students in 8th grade, BCS is giving our children something many other districts are not, a good foundation on which they can build their own opinions and solutions to the issue of race in America. I think many are fearful of the words racism and racist, thinking these terms are only applicable to those most undesirable. Our students need to understand these words aren't meant as hateful labels, but need to be unpacked personally to determine the effects that actions may even unintentionally have on others. This book scratches the surface, and with luck, will lead some to investigate further on their own time. Our entire family has now read this book, and I can, from firsthand experience, say that it has opened doors to conversations about race and other challenging topics of the day. I'm finding that the fine work that is being done by Ms. Gray in ELA and Mr. Woods in civics is having a very positive impact on my daughter. She is developing a voice of her own and the courage to use it with respect to not only race, but also equally charged issues of abortion rights and sexual orientation. I won't say that I necessarily agree with her opinions on every topic, but I surely will stand up for her right to formulate those opinions and defend them if necessary. Our children are the future, and we need to stop living in the past and continuing to turn a blind eye to racism. With that, I would like to extend my thanks to you and the board for having the courage to approve this work. despite the backlash that I'm sure you expected. I would also like to thank Mrs. Gray for her vision and perseverance. She is doing a wonderful job and needs to be encouraged to continue. She's made a difference in at least one life that I know of. We can all only wish to be as successful. Again, that's Robert Graham. That concludes our correspondence. And at this time, I'd like to have a presentation to some board members. So Rebecca?
We'll let Brandy go first.
Or Brandy? Sure.
Okay. Where's Frank? Oh, there she is. Okay. Good evening. Fran Viscomi has been a part of the Berlin Community School family for, well, it seems like forever. Fran started out in the copy room in 1979. She then transferred into the TST team as their secretary, retiring after 21 years. She may have retired from working at the school, but that did not stop her from running and being elected to serve on the Berlin Community School Board of Education. Fran has served the community of Berlin in many ways, not only through the school, but she was the driving force to start Berlin AA and the softball program. She has been an active community member, volunteering to help in any capacity she could. Having sat beside Fran for the last 2 years on the board have been educational as well as enlightening. Fran, I will miss your words of wisdom, your story anecdotes, and the history you have shared with me. Even though you thought my name was Tiffany for the first year, or, well, maybe you still do. On behalf of Tiffany and the board, we thank you for your years of service and wish you a healthy and happy retirement. You're welcome.
So I wanted to say a couple words too, Fran. A few words about my colleague and friend, Fran Viscomi. Fran has been a member of the Berlin Community School Board of Education since April 2005. Prior to that, she worked in the school as the Child Study Team Secretary. Fran has been an active member of our community since she moved in and raised her daughters here in the late 1960s. Fran has always been a champion for our children. Her motto is, "The children are our future," and she has worked tirelessly to be sure that they have that opportunity for that great future. Fran's life of service started off with her moving to Berlin, joining our community, and getting involved with her own 4 daughters' educations. She noticed that Berlin did not seem to have any sports programs for girls. Fran volunteered and helped found the Berlin Athletic Association. She then organized the Berlin AA softball program and was the co-founder of the South Jersey Girls Traveling Softball League. She was also involved with CER and coached girls basketball. All the while working at school as the Child Study Secretary and volunteering for any other group that needed her. After she retired in 2004, she wasn't finished. She ran for the Berlin Community School Board of Education and has been an active member, ensuring that the school is being run properly for the last 15 years. During that time, she has served as the chairperson for the Personnel Committee and served on the Board of Negotiations Committee, Policy Committee, and Finance Committee. Fran has devoted her life to serving others and serving the children of Berlin. Fran, I have to say I am thankful that I have had the privilege of getting to know you and work with you. Your knowledge and work of the workings of the school and the board are immeasurable. I have learned so much from you and truly will miss our talks and being with you at the meetings. And I am so grateful that we have become friends. On behalf of Berlin Community School Board of Education, it's my honor to present you with this apple and thank you for your 15 years of service and lifetime of devotion to this community. Thank you, Fran. We wish you the best.
also suffering, oh, right, happy birthday, Fran. The board is also suffering another loss. We're gaining some new members, but this lady down here to the left, she's responsible for me moving to this community. And I'm going to miss working with her and sharing great conversations with her about how to progress our district and do all of the wonderful work that we sit up here month after month, and I feel like day after day and hour after hour sometimes to do. You just can't work with a greater force than Mrs. Lisa Asari. She works hard on behalf of the children in this district. She works hard on behalf of the people of the state of New Jersey as the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Health. I certainly feel safer with her being around and just, knowing what to do and what not to do. I'm going to deeply miss those shared experiences, but I appreciate the fact that you are my sister from a different mister, so, I'll love you forever on that. So on behalf of the Board of Education, Dr. Campisi is presenting an apple to you as you go on to join the Eastern Regional Board of Education and act as the liaison between Berlin Community School and Eastern. Thank you for your service here, Lisa. Moving along on our agenda, we do have the board goals. The board goals, I'll just give the highlights. Some of them are remaining the same from last year, simply because we had a shortened year due to COVID. So goal 1 was to improve school and district performance by setting and meeting high expectations for academic achievement for all students to prepare them for continued success. Goal 2, to increase educator preparedness to meet the needs of every student by setting high standards for the performance of teachers and administrators as evidenced by improved student learning. Goal 3 was to eliminate opportunity gaps by providing a teaching and learning climate and environment where racial, ethnic, and economic isolation is reduced and the diversity of our student population is embraced. I think that was all. Goal 4, I apologize. Board members will be able to uphold their role and responsibilities to ensure that the district is responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of the community, and that is our newly added goal. And there are objectives listed under that. In the minutes, I'm sure we can get all of the goals and all of the objectives that we are looking at using to meet those goals. Could I have a motion and second to approve our board goals?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Thank you. Okay. Sorry, did I skip the superintendent's report? I apologize. Going to Joe for the superintendent's report. Navigating screens there, I apologize. Superintendent's report, Dr. Campisi.
That's quite okay, Mrs. Lewis. We had a shorter than normal turnaround time since our last board meeting, so my report is actually fairly short. I have my usual list of reports for board approval. Unfortunately, we had to continue our remote-only learning environment due to staffing issues. At the time the letter went out, the principals, they made and sent out some very heartfelt videos after I communicated that we were going to have to extend our remote learning. So if you haven't had a chance to check them out, please do. They're also linked into their respective reports within the action items under the superintendent's report. Phil and Kelly Lynn, thank you very much for wearing it on your sleeve and putting that out to the students. We also had our first pandemic response team meeting this month. Parent-teacher conferences were held, and the HSA has their drive-through book fair going on. It's continuing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So a motion and second to approve items 1 through 10 upon the recommendation of the superintendent.
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari, Mrs. Del Palazzo, Mr. Greenberg,
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Simone, Mrs. Titus,
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi, Mrs. Holland,
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis.
Yes,
That motion passes.
thank you. Looking at facilities, Brandy?
So we have on here to approve tonight withdrawing money to repair our roof, part of our roof. And a garrison architect to be the professional to provide services to the school and then to be able to put out for bid.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Brandy? Hearing none. Could I have a motion and second to approve, it's really items 1 through 3, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, and I'll take the resolution separately.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Excuse me, Ms. Lewis, was that 1 through 3 or 1 through 4?
It's 1 through 3 because the drills, they were not able to complete, so they didn't actually do any, unless you want me to have that approved also, that we didn't do any.
Because there is a number 4 as well.
Right, I sort of, yeah, I renumbered them 1, 2, and 3 because number 1 was unable to complete due to remote-only learning.
Okay, so you just renumbered.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mrs. Asari? Mrs. Del Palazzo? Mr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi?
Yes.
Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
And Mrs. Lewis.
Yes,
Okay, that motion passes.
thank you. Resolution 11-18-2020-1. This is the resolution for BCS for the partial roof replacement, which Brandy just explained, and the repairs project for submission to the New Jersey Department of Education. Motion and second, please.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Mrs. Del Palazzo? Mr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe? Mrs.
Yes.
Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi? Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis.
Yes,
That motion passes.
thank you. Finance, Lisa Kehoe?
We had a shorter month, as Dr. Campisi mentioned, but we did review October's billings. We discussed the bid on the truck, which is coming in at $7,500, along with desks and chairs from the middle school that have been retired. We discussed the homebound instruction and tuition agreement with Gloucester Township. And we have continued our talk on the budget for the 21-22 year coming up. Mr. Scavoli brought us up to date on the staffing and salary projections for next year. He also spoke of the preliminary health benefits and the Chapter 78 and 44 employee benefit packages and the costs and savings for the different plans that are in force this year. He also informed us of the upcoming dates for the planning, the budget planning, and the pieces of the puzzle that have to be put together before the budget's completed, and the local and state funding and timing and anticipated hopeful projections from the state for funding for next year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So a motion and second to approve items 1 through 13 upon the recommendation of the superintendent.
Motion?
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Mrs. Del Palazzo? Mr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi?
Yes.
Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis.
Yes,
That motion passes.
thank you. Looking at the resolution 11-18-2020-2. This is a resolution to approve the award of the sale of surplus property through an online auction. Motion and second.
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Mrs. Del Palazzo? Mr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi? Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis.
Yes,
That motion passes.
thank you. Moving to curriculum, Lisa Asari. Thank you. So we have no action items under curriculum. And looking at policy, Jeff.
So policy met on Tuesday the 10th, I believe it was. We reviewed the first 8 on the agenda here. They're under second review and ultimately adoption. There was one revision which I wanted to speak quickly on. And that revision is to the resource material policy. It's number 2530. The review essentially allows for a more in-depth and complete review of all resource materials being used, whether it be for one subject or for all. Just to break it down and make it nice and simple for us, there's essentially a 5-step selection process. The first step is that the principal will accept a written request. It's going to be on a special form by the teaching staff for any new or revised selections of resources. The principal will then share the request with the superintendent and the rest of the administration team. The administration team will then measure each recommendation against the current standards for the selection and essentially the amount budgeted if there's any extra materials necessary. From that point on, the administration will consult with the appropriate curriculum supervisor from Eastern Regional High School to more, I guess, properly align with the educational requirements of that school as well. It allows for vertical articulation, discusses the educational merits, and that kind of thing. And then finally, once approved, the consultation will end, and the appropriate supervisor from Eastern, superintendent from Berlin Community School will meet and then ultimately present either the approval or the denial of the resource material. So again, a much more in-depth review of each resource, hopefully allowing for a little bit more input across the board. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so a motion and second to approve, this is items, we'll take 1 through 9, and then we'll take a look at what's under 10 separately. Is that okay, Mr. Scioli?
Yes.
Okay. So items 1 through 9 under policies upon the recommendation of the superintendent. A motion and second, please. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Yes. Mrs. Del Palazzo? Mr. Greenberg? Yes. Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi?
Yes.
Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Thank you. So item 10, which is listed under policy, is to allow us, one, to suspend the bylaw 0131 that requires 2 readings to adopt the bylaw or policy, and adopt bylaw 0164.6, where we can just do 1 reading to be in compliance with the new emergency regulations regarding remote meetings held during a governor-declared emergency. And the act is listed there for you from the Department of Community Affairs. So a motion and second to approve this item under policy.
Motion.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Yes. Mrs. Del Palazzo? Mr. Greenberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi?
Yes.
Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis?
Yes,
That motion passes.
thank you. Personnel, Fran?
Thank you. On Monday evening, November 9th, the Personnel Committee discussed the following items: the resignation of a special instructional assistant and the retirement of a middle school teacher, which will take place January 31st, 2021. Those openings are to be posted as soon as possible. I would like to congratulate our Ms. Barrett on her retirement, middle school teacher, and we hope she enjoys her time. Kelly said, education staffing is sub. We need it in October, as you see, 56.8%. There are not enough subs to go around. Once we made that are on the listing, we'll have their wages increased for the January 2021 to the minimum wage level.
Thank you. So I have a motion and second to approve items 1 through 11 under personnel.
Motion.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Asari? Mrs. Del Palazzo? Did you say yes? Sorry. Mr. Greenberg? Yes. Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Simone? Mrs. Titus?
Yes.
Mrs. Viscomi?
Yes.
Mrs. Holland?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis?
Yes,
That motion passes.
thank you, and congratulations to Mrs. Harris on her retirement. Looking at public participation, this meeting will now be open to the public. If your questions or comments pertain to litigation, students, personnel, or negotiations, we would ask that you establish a time to meet with the superintendent after the meeting, since the board will not discuss these items in public. Complaints stated or actions requested by the public will be taken under advisement by the board and referred to the superintendent for investigation, discussion, action, or disposition at a later date or time. Please keep in mind that the public comment session is an opportunity for you to share your opinions and remarks with the board, and it is not a question and answer session. Please be aware that all district employees retain the right of privacy. Please also be reminded that any individuals who may be the subject of public comments, including district employees, shall retain all rights against defamation and slander according to the laws of New Jersey. The board will not be held liable for comments made by members of the public. Any person wishing to participate in the public board meeting must register, which we already have that list, prior to the conclusion of the presentation section of the meeting, and will be recognized by the presiding officer when it is their time to speak. Please state your name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No participant may address or question board members individually. If personal or discourteous statements are made, the presiding officer may require the speaker to stop. The presiding officer reserves the right to request a recess. The total comment period will be 30 minutes unless extended by a vote of the majority of the board members present at the meeting. All public participation is governed by District Bylaw 0167. A motion and second to open to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Thank you. This meeting is now open for public participation, and the first person that I have is Michael Ann Bird for, I guess, on behalf of Tammy Mosier, and the comment topic is stamps. Oh, sure.
I am Michael Ann Bird, and I'm reading this letter in the absence of Tammy Mosier, a concerned parent of 2 8th graders. Please excuse my absence, as my family is currently quarantining. The matter of 8th grade ELA is of great importance to me, and I would be there if I could. I am addressing the board with a formal request to supply our 8th grade students with an alternative assignment to the reading of Stamped. This book is causing countless issues in homes and between students and was poorly presented from the start. The issues with this book are many, too many to discuss within 3 minutes. For starters, there was no parental consent of warning of such text being used in ELA. The author clearly states that he is angry and not historically accurate. I first heard of the text being used when my daughters were discussing hurt feelings and arguments occurring over social media among students, so I decided to begin reading. Don't you think the parents should have been asked, as you do for a movie shown in class? We were not. As I began reading, I was appalled at the anger, tone, and clear bias being forced upon young readers, most of which regarded topics that they have yet to even learn about in school, giving them no subcontext to make an educated decision or debate. I, as an adult, would not want to be put in that situation. I was specifically disgusted at an inappropriate and horrifyingly inaccurate account from the Bible. While the writer so kindly quickly stated it was a whimsical interpretation, it was not whimsical. It is a gross misinterpretation of the book of Genesis, chapter 6 of the Old Testament. For those who were fortunate enough to have missed it, the author shares the story of the white Noah and his son Ham. It discusses Noah instructing his son not to have sex with his wife, and since he didn't listen, his children would be black and bad. What? Upon my reading, I quickly wrote to Miss Gray asking her to share the correct account as written in Genesis. Miss Gray simply forwarded my email, did not respond, and did not correct the misinterpretation of the Bible as I requested. Wow, is this how we are going to approach all the inaccuracies in this book? Later, it continues to shame missionaries and their desire to share their love for Christ because they view black people as savages. Who gives this man the right to cast doubt in the minds of my children for the motives of someone he never even knew? Are you aware the author is reading to the students in class with full anger and disgust in tone? Apparently, reading themselves isn't sufficient. They are not hearing other viewpoints, and this assignment will continue for weeks on end. Sex, rape, negative police sentiments, among many of what is yet to come. I say no thank you. If we can't correct inaccuracies from the basics of the Christian and Jewish religion, I doubt inaccuracies of the social climate will be touched. Our children have enough stress right now, we all do. Most days are so far from normal with anxiety, depression, and health concerns that being high for most everyone. Why are we adding daily to conflict and stress? This is not one article, it is months of battle. You don't hear the awful side conversations at home or on phones. Will you listen to my request and offer an alternative or simply stop and return to our past curriculum? Not what is the social agenda of some. They have read enough already. Each day you ignore these issues and delay a decision. You hurt our children instead of grow their interest in reading and learning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. And next we have Scott Hansen, and his comment is on the middle school schedule.
Good evening. Scott Hansen, Presidential Drive, Berlin. My concern with the middle school schedule is the inconsistency of it, and we were told about a month ago that we had to reduce the time in school for our students because of staffing issues. Now that we're fully virtual, that seems kind of irrelevant to us, and our children are losing several hours a week of school time here. Is there any plan for us to go back to full-time, to the previous schedule for the year, to maximize the time that kids are in school while they're virtually? Because this adds up over time, how much they're losing. And we need to maximize what we can for our children to maximize their education. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Seeing no others signed in for public comment, motion and second to close the public participation. No, unfortunately, we did it at the beginning of the meeting as it's set in our agenda. It's set on the agenda to be taken before we even start with the vast majority of the meeting. Sure, Mr. Ballack.
If you'd like me to sign it, I will sign.
No, we'll take your name and address.
Thank you, Madam President. Fran Ballack, 13 Tansgate Boulevard, Berlin. I just wanted to talk about, I'm not going to talk about the book. I was here last time and you guys heard my...
Could you just pull your mask back up, though? Thank you.
I was here last time and you guys heard what I had to say about the book, so I'm not going to repeat myself with regards to that. I do want to talk about, however, how I see the process having broken down, and I have some requests and solutions to maybe have it improved. What I heard tonight when the letters were read by you was some people on both sides of the opinions with regards to this book. And I think that's good. I think it's good that people are hearing both sides. Some people in support, some people against. However, I think that kind of dialogue and that kind of communication should have taken place before this book was put into place. I've requested, and I've requested for many months, on many occasions, to know when the book was considered, what other books were considered, who was on this committee, and I've gotten no information on that. I've actually had to send an Oprah request. The Oprah request is now overdue, and I've tried to ask for simple questions or simple documents that I think should have been provided long time ago that I am not getting the responses to. I indicated that I needed this information because of the meeting tonight, because I wanted to be able to address the board tonight about concerns, and without the information, I'm left at a blank. But what my problem is a little bit is also goes back to the last meeting, where I think part of the problem is that there was a lot of communication that was made to the superintendent that was not brought to the board's attention about this policy and about this book. So I would suggest to the board that maybe if there's correspondences that are given to the administration about actions or policies that the board itself has taken, that be required as a policy to be provided and circulated to the board. Because when I was here last meeting, it seemed as though there was an indication that no one had contacted the superintendent to inform him that they had problems with the book. That was not accurate. And now we have a problem where you have a bit of a divided community, it sounds like, or at least a community that is a little bit upset with how things are being run because the board did not know about it. Because also how the stakeholders, the community, were not given an opportunity to actually have some input as to what the changing curriculum was going to be. So I've suggested if there's going to be a change like that, that the stakeholders, the community, actually be considered as part of having input, having their views and their opinions considered before having these drastic actions taken. So then you don't run into a situation where you are now, after the fact, people criticizing either the board or administration on actions that have been taken when they did not have an opportunity and they feel like they've been shut out. I can tell you, I feel like my opinions in trying to get information from the administration has been really thrown up against the wall. I've been dismissed. I've been told, not given information that I think should be provided. And that's what I would just like to say, that I think it can be improved, because I think as a board, you guys are entitled to know what the stakeholders' views are.
Thank you for your comment.
Madam President, I apologize. I'm not sure whether or not there will be a secondary list for public comment.
I'm sorry?
Will you have a secondary list for public comment?
No, we don't have, this was our second public session, so we're not taking any additional comment.
May I ask if I can speak? I'm about the second motion to department head, and I think that would allow me to cover.
I will take you in one moment, Dr. Harris. Thank you. Could I have a motion and second to close to public participation as we move on to our presentation?
Motion.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. I do want to just ensure that this idea and this concept is present with the audience as well as with the board members. We do not run the school. We ensure that the schools are run well. That is our task and our duty as members of the Board of Education. And I do always appreciate the comment from the public, but I also want to ensure that we understand what we're indicating when we say ignore or denied a statement or an opinion. That's a concept that we teach our children. I certainly teach it to mine, that just because you don't get your way doesn't mean that you've been ignored or that you've been denied. Actually, tonight we passed a policy that revises how we approve parts of our curriculum, and that policy passed with 9, right? All 9 in favor of that policy, so that we are putting our curriculum through the rigor that it deserves to ensure that our children receive a quality education and that they have access to an excellent education. So we have done that. We have taken that step. We have not ignored or denied anyone. The board takes action at meetings. We do not take action in between meetings. We do not take action via email or in sidebar conversations. That's not how we behave. That's not how governance happens. It's not how democracy works. And I'm sure we're all aware of that as adults in the audience, as we don't have any children present tonight. So we take action at meetings like this. And so we are considering an alternate text. However, that text now needs to be vetted through the process that we just approved tonight. We have a curriculum committee that looks at the books, communicates with our administrative team, as they are the folks who are in charge of carrying out our curriculum, and then we bring it to the full board. We revise the policy so that there are some additional layers and some additional oversight to that, and that is what will occur with the alternate text, which we selected from a parent who sent a list of books to us. So we've selected a text, we're reviewing that text, and we will do that in our curriculum committee, and we will push it through the entire policy and vet it as appropriate. Moving on to the presentation, we do have Dr. Stephanie Harris with us tonight, and I thank you for attending. Just a quick introduction. She thought she needed to speak in public, and we actually have her on the agenda. So Dr. Harris is the Executive Director of the New Jersey Amistad Commission, a division of the Department of Education. This groundbreaking, state-mandated educational initiative is tasked with the full infusion and inclusion of African American historical content into New Jersey's K-12 curriculum and statewide standards. This infusion was mandated by New Jersey legislation in 2002 and is a statewide overhaul and redirection for social studies and the humanities in all grades in every district throughout the state. This legal mandate is the first of its kind in the nation. Dr. Harris received dual degrees, a Bachelor of Arts degree in English with a specialization in African American literature, and a Bachelor of Science degree in African American Studies from the University of Maryland, College Park. After receiving her undergraduate degrees, she earned both her master's and doctorate of philosophy from Temple University in the Department of Africology and African American Studies. Dr. Harris has worked in various institutions for more than 25 years, cross-pollinating public education and the infusion of African American historical content and culture via the modality of schools, museums, historical societies, cultural institutions, and the government. She is a firm believer in the power of contextualization of history for students and that artistic, historical, and cultural artifacts are exceptional teaching tools. Coupled with historical research and scholarship, Dr. Harris strives to present our intertwined history as the perfect foundation for the deconstruction of historical mistruths and the necessity for an accurate discussion of American history. As the Executive Director of the Amistad Commission, Dr. Harris was charged with the responsibility of ensuring that African Americans' content, contribution, and experiences are historically infused and adequately taught in all of the state's classrooms. According to the auspices of the legislation, New Jersey did not design a separate African American Studies course for New Jersey school districts, but will make sure that African American content is taught in all levels of social studies and the humanities. Dr. Harris.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, board members. I'm here not as a response negative. And I sat through a portion of your meeting and kind of had, and I'm on a kind of bridge. You know, I'm back.
No, you're fine.
As a response to a lot of the conversations and the public comments and the concerns of the community. And first I want to commend Berlin for galvanizing around some critical issues, but also allowing yourselves to step up to the plate to be able to have some courageous conversations in your curriculum and infusion. As your board president would say, I am the executive director of the Amistad Commission at the Department of Ed. And our office is responsible for being able to mitigate and also to assist districts in moving through this process in a lot of instances. I hear your concern, but I think that we need to be very clear that some of this work that we're going to do is uncomfortable. And in a space of uncomfort, so you really don't grow. I know that this challenges a lot of people to think about the notions of these levels of discussions. And I've heard all of your comments and saying that you felt that in the world in which we're living right now, why add any of these conversations for our students or questioning the historical validity of some of the ideas that might be in the text or even, whether or not it's historically accurate, or, some of the remedies and content that come out of this particular text. Let's just say this, or even I heard the gentleman just said about policies and procedures, and whether or not they have been followed through. This is a delicate subject, and this is an area that I know is uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's one that, in this book particularly, right, I think we need to get very clear on this book particular. The book's premise stamp is a book of historiography, book about the history of these racist ideas to encourage students to be anti-racist, to encourage citizenship, to be able to understand the reality of these sometimes invisible biases that have become sometimes so much a part of the systems around us that unless we can identify them, confront them and talk about them, then we can empower our kids to actually be in the space to actually make sure that they're very specific to overcome them. We want our kids to be global learners. We want our kids to be able to embrace the diversity and ethnicity of us all. Which means we also want them to be able to understand and be reflective and appreciative of the multiple perspectives and sometimes experiences and divergent experiences that we have all lived with in this nation. That was the purpose of Now Sidewalk, to making sure that all of those that have felt any kinds of marginalization or that they are all become reflected in a collective and collaborative curriculum that allows them all to be represented. Which means that by the part of it, it really is about giving sometimes multiple narratives. No book that is ever going to be approved by a board of education is ever going to be a historical mystery. I think we need to just establish that. I understand that you guys might not agree with the realities of the book, but no school district in the state of New Jersey is going to approve something that is based on lies. Now, I think in understanding the interpretation of the book, there's a reality that what he's bringing forward is some of the mythologies that have been used throughout history. Some of them are ironic. Some of them should seem and feel preposterous to us. That is the reality of why these ideas are antiquated, why these ideas that have come into our history should be able to be discussed and dismissed. There is no interest, I think, in anybody who is trying to do what Amistad is charged to do. And this is state law. So I think the reality is that we can discuss and think about what works we want to read. We can debate on whether or not we feel that this one is a little safer than another. We can debate on whether or not we like the conversations that might move forward. But the reality is that New Jersey has adopted this legal mandate. This legal mandate that really is going to grow our kids. Make them aware. Answer some questions for them. Allow them to understand who we all are. It's not about making them hate or to make them not want to be able to embrace. But sometimes it is, I understand, an uncomfortable space. It feels like this community has been divided over school design. I feel like I moved it in the space in which we are, so much of our remote learning, that our schoolroom has entered into our home spaces. And I know that for a lot of us, as we walk past the computer systems and we hear snippets and we might observe something that we might not understand the full context of how it was taught. I heard 3 separate times someone said tonight that they thought that this book was historically inaccurate, or that the depictions were something that was angry. I listened to to Jason Willis of the Department of Health. We're using irony. I don't know if that got lost in the quick translation of moving past the computer in certain instances. There's a lot of irony being used. When he said this is not his history book, he was talking about, if you listen to perhaps the beginning of the book, because if you listen to it in snippets, because I know that these kids are not, the audio book and the reading of the book, audio book is 4+ hours. So if you jump in on chapter 11, the premise of the book, the setup of the book is that he wants students to be able to engage in these conversations and not present it in a way that feels like a black and white history textbook. He wants them to learn or be able to dismantle some of these ideas. He wants them to understand sometimes even the ironic and ridiculous notions that over the course of time have created some of our ideas about race, right or wrong. And he's presented them in a way that they should become critical thinkers and to be able to debate and dismantle them themselves, see the ridiculousness of it. But he says it in the beginning when he sets it up, that he doesn't want them to feel that they are reading a history book. And he plates that kind of joke throughout the text. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not saying kind of history book. He's trying to say that it's a book in which he does not want them to feel like they are being burdened or overburdened or taxed with feelings that are with a heavy history. I have offered to help and assist mitigating whatever it is that this community needs to feel comfortable that we are poised and prepared to be able to do the work that is needed to repair this breach. But I also want to be very careful and cognizant. See, I looked at your reading. I'm wondering whether anybody felt like this about the book Witness. Did we have this response? Does anybody even know what the book Witness is about? Did the community come in outrage about KKK revolution? Did we come with outrage position? And that is right. Do not want to address that or to not come in those cases. But I don't want us to give this lesson. See, if we provide this community the way we do, and if we've made this under such a microscope, my feeling is that in lessons to come, in conversations to come, what we're going to end up teaching our children is that any conversation about race, African-American content, African-American people, is so loaded that it divides the community. That can't happen. Because your students want to be in many more instances, in many more conversations. And the beauty of what you're really doing right here is you're arming them to be able to have an intellectual debate in high school, to be able to disarm some of the ideologies they might face in this world. They really will become global learners and global thinkers. They will be able to understand irony. They will be able to understand rhetoric or sarcasm. They will see satire. There's a lot of skill bases in the ELA skills and the reason why this book is there and this book is a part of the selection. It's a lot bigger than just contextualization of race. But what it seems to happen is that because we are in a remote setting, and we are able to kind of oversee and see, we made it such a public conversation for our kids. And I understand that there's things that we can disagree with. It's fine. We all should. We should all be able to weigh in and say what we ascribe to or which ideologies and what other things in our belief systems we want to make sure they're brought forward. But in a teaching institution, we should be able to have a discourse where all of those ideas are brought forward. It's the purpose of the law. It is the purpose of why we are doing this level of work. I understand how this level of work can move out of the classroom into our emotions. I deal with this a lot with teachers and how to be able to tackle this level of work. In actuality, I've actually commended, and I want to commend her again, Ms. Wright, about even being willing to courageously take this moment. Because there's a lot of teachers that don't. A lot of teachers that don't. They would be afraid to get under the pressure. But she was willing. If you're concerned about the lessons, then we have every right to be able to address them completely. But I would just ask this. I don't want us to divide our kids. We're watching. And I want them to feel comfortable for the rest of the day to be able to talk about this. This isn't a book about African American history per se. It is clearly what it says. But the end goal of having kids be woke, and if you read it, he said about 12, 15 times in the book in different chapters, aware, and then be fully intentional about doing something about it, being anti-racist, being active agents, and making sure that they disengage with those kinds of ideas, those fallacies, those mythologies, sometimes implicit, sometimes explicit. But if they don't even make them aware of sometimes how they interplay in this world, they can't do it. The skills that are behind some of this work are going to benefit our kids. And then we need to figure out how we can mitigate it so that we don't rely on communities of it. Now, I do understand that the board has set criteria. I commend you on goal 3. The board, and I'm just going to remind you guys, the board goal 3 actually raised this conversation. This book falls right within the criteria of goal 3. Very importantly, New Jersey is the first state in the nation to actually adopt such a law. The reality is it's an extremely diverse state, something we should all be extremely, extremely proud of. And in these kinds of curriculum works, we have made a very intentional decision that we would have a multitude of representation, that we would make sure that there is a multitude of representation. But in our curriculum decisions and the abilities for us to be able to make book recommendations and the likes, we also want to make sure that there are multiple perspectives. And our standard textbooks sometimes have not dealt fully with the whole narrative of what has happened in this nation. And that's okay, because there have been many historians that have done bodies of work to be able to add to that story. Despite whether or not you agree or you like the book, Dr. Henry is a very respected historian. He did not write for Wikipedia. If there are suggestions of additional primary sources, that you can see that what is being reflected from the speech of other people, maybe we need to think about making sure that there are added so that you feel comfortable about where the source is, not fictions. And we're not no one's attempting to have any level of indoctrination. In the same way that when we were reading Witness, we were not attempting to make every student adopt ideas of white supremacy or not join the claim. We read in this text. It's part of what happens in literature, it's part of what happens in social studies. I just hope that we don't make this the linchpin for something else. I just hope we don't. Because you know what, the next text will come. And if nobody is conflicted, and nobody's showing up, nobody makes it a big war, nobody is sending emails or conversations or any kind of protest, but this is saying like this. When you do this one, this is the reaction. When you do this one, fiction, historical content, instructional materials, etc., to make sure that there is a diversification in the curriculum. And this is some of the work. There is a move across the state for more students to understand issues of social justice, because of biases, advocacy, etc., understanding of the instruction of race. So this is some of the remedy. This book has been going, since it came out in March, has been read not by one school district, but a cohort of school districts. I don't even know if you're aware that there's been conversations and dialogue with other middle school teams in other districts, very similar, even in the demographics and the size and the composition of the words, that are reading it in concert. There's working groups that are happening right now to be able to exchange lesson plans, etc., to the students and best practices and the likes. I'm going to help with Mrs. Gray, help her extend with those levels of conversation. She's not on her own. She won't be on her own. She's not attempting to do something that is outside of the parameters of what she is not only hired to do, but also regulated to do in the same manifestation as she would do for any other portion of this work. My goal here is not to give you pushback, but to simply give you maybe an opposing point of view. We said in this meeting that's what we want to be able to do, to be able to give and present an opposing point of view. And here's a resource. I live local. I'm here to be able to help both the board, but also the district, and the teachers, and most especially your students. I want them to feel empowered that they are going to be equipped with what is necessary for them to truly be the global citizens that we want to see them be. In order to do that, sometimes we need to have an understanding of the world. And everything in the world sometimes is not pretty, tied up with a little bow. That is the reality. I know all of us are much more comfortable with history that is tied up with, the bow, or, stays on one sort of longitudinal focus. But then if that was the case, then we made a subjective place of history. And we made that subjective place and act as though it is objective. It is not. History in itself is subjective. In its recording of it, in its alignment of it, in people's opinion of it, it is a written record. So my kids are going to learn to know that. And I hope that we can be comfortable with that. And even in our uncomfort, we don't make it divide. The chasms for this, outside of this world, I don't want to become so forward and trying to divide for kids or divide for students. Not at all. I don't know. We can debate cabinets. But we don't need to. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
In all fairness, I think the study guide that went out, I believe was my that was not the study guide that was supposed to go out. So that is, I believe, a huge part of the problem.
And I understand.
And
And I'm not
the
having a conversation.
is going, and I just have one more thing. Dr. Kennedy, so when we were presented, I looked at the agenda again before this was last month. I was only able to read the intro. I didn't have the book. Started researching the authors, Dr. Kennedy's Twitter account. Some of his tweets I found very inappropriate.
Okay.
Very political. He made a recent tweet about the new Supreme Court justice. I found the tweet very racist.
Okay.
But yet we're supposed to present our children with this.
But that's his Twitter account.
Correct.
I'm understanding what you're saying, but I need to understand who I am as a teacher, who I am as a professor, who I am as a historian. It cannot be the same as what my personal views are. And I hear what you're saying. But if you're looking, if you're digging, I think the reality is that if we start digging at everybody's personal stuff, we might find something in everybody. And that would be offensive. But he's not putting that, his opinion about the Supreme Court justice is not in this book.
I just thought it was inappropriate, and we're bringing this into a public school.
What is inappropriate? His Twitter account? The students were taught the Twitter?
Well,
But the lesson
parents
wasn't on the Twitter.
research it, and it is offensive.
But ma'am, the lesson's not on Twitter. And if you told me that the teacher was teaching his Twitter, I'd actually.
And I don't know what she's, you know.
Well, then that's the question you need to ask.
Right.
Because if she's teaching a lesson on his Twitter account, I'm going to be in agreement with you.
Right.
But ma'am, I can show you textbooks in which people, ideas, Madison Grant wrote a textbook. Most of us know him when we think of him as an environmentalist. He was also a eugenicist. He believed in survival of the fittest. He thought that people should be sterilized. When most of our kids have learned the name Madison Grant, they talked about him for environmental protections, the person that meets the national parks, save the buffalo. The kids do not learn about the other portion of it, but that's his personal beliefs. Because as an adult, we can tweet. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but that's not what he's writing in this book. And so if we're in a space now where we're saying, after the fact, that I went to pick a book choice based on somebody's personal beliefs that I found on their Twitter, we could do that for everything.
No, what I'm saying is that I did not have the opportunity to read the book the night before the agenda for the approval, so I researched the authors.
Okay.
Some of the things that I found were offensive. So I do think maybe the community, that might be part of the issue, that some of his personal feelings rolled over into the...
But who decided? See, this is the thing.
And it's opinions.
But I'm fine with that.
And
you can
he
have
said
that opinion, but
many
have
times-
that, how did that enter into the ethos of this school? And that's what we have to address. See, the adults and school is one thing. Our community, our parents, I'm a mom. Right? I have 2 children. So I understand where I am as a mom. I also understand where I am as an educator. And so if the conversation about his Twitter account became a part of the conversation that was entered in with the kids, then as adults, we might have to understand even our space of our own wall, right? Because that's not what's being taught here. Mrs. Gray is not teaching them.
And I guess the
his Twitter.
study guide questions would make you think the original study guide questions reflect his Twitter account.
So, but you understand that he didn't draft the study guide questions. That was done by the publishing company.
I do.
And so the publishing company also drafted it as facts that were coming out or assessments that were coming out of the book. They were also drafted for a certain course level, whatever. And we can address whether or not those study guide questions in its entirety should have been what should have been for an ELA English class. I do believe that those have been addressed and they have been redone. So I understand. And so perhaps maybe not looking at it, because this is a book that is being taught in both ELA and history. Very different in regards to how you do instruction, how you do assessments, how you are asking questions, which you are looking for in regards to those questions. The study guide was addressed and created for a history course, in which there would be a lot of additional dialogues, primary sources, and a lot of that would have entered in for them to be able to answer those questions. So I'm not in disagreement with you at all about it, but it is A plus plea does not mean C all the time. And so if we're addressing the study guide questions and we have remedied that, then I would just ask that we do not poison the well for these kids about what you found on a Twitter account, unless you're telling me that that's what she's teaching. And again, because what is very clear in this book is that he is simply giving the history. Historiography is a history of something. He's giving a historiography of ideas about race so that students can feel empowered to be anti-racist. He's giving all of that on both sides of the coin. He's not talking about his own personal opinion. We can pull it in concert and say we're going to pull facts, we're going to pull primary sources to see where did he get this from. We could do that.
Let me read an intro that I read. I believe it was very anti-police. We're a school district. We're trying to have positive relationships.
How is that anti-police? Do you have an example?
I do. All the police shootings that you mentioned, Michael Brown.
Okay.
I believe that was a strong arm robbery.
Okay.
Or wannabe cops. You mentioned Trayvon Martin's, Zimmerman's wannabe cops.
Okay.
We're trying to present positive relationships with our resource officers.
Okay.
And I feel like just the intro, like I said, I opened up the agenda the night before, and I was able to read the preview of the book. I did feel like, wow, it's very anti-police.
But if I said to you that I would have an issue with my child reading something that was like Witness, which was a book that was talking about the KKK. See, I would sound ridiculous. I would feel like I sound ridiculous because
I don't feel like I sound ridiculous.
I'm not saying you do, but I'm saying I would feel that I would feel like I would sound ridiculous because it's a book. The book is not attempting to indoctrinate our kids. It's a book.
Right, and I think it's an ideology that.
There's plenty of ideology we don't ascribe
Yes,
to.
and I understand it's the text and we need to be objective.
Right.
I think the feeling of some of the members in the community, it built up to this, because after the vote was presented, then the study guide went out, and you saw the questions. So to be fair, I believe that's why we are kind of, we have two sides.
I understand. And I think that the study guide question has been addressed.
Yes.
And if it was any other book and a parent came and they said, I didn't like this question, and the study guide question would be addressed, it pretty much would end there. That's where it would end. It wouldn't become a full war back and forth in this nature. It would end because we said she's addressed the issue that when I hear you saying is your issue, you didn't like the study guide questions. They've been addressed.
Yes.
So that there's other lessons and things, and we also have to talk about procedure. So how are the questions then done? So are they coming back to the board, or are you now requiring that for this book the community must all weigh in on lessons, or are you allowing the administration to be able to weigh in here and then assist with being able to reconstruct whatever needs to be done as an instructional model? Because I think we do, and I was a vice president of the board for a long time, so I understand sitting in this seat. We do need to, I guess, all of our roles in this education realm need to be clearly defined so that we can at least not leave those roles on top of everything else right now when it's becoming charged. Are you feel comfortable that she addressed the issue in
Oh, yes.
regards of the survey?
Yes.
And I'm not dismissing your ideas. I'm just saying that there are personal feelings and we have a lot of them. I think everybody in this room, the reality is that as many people as in this room, we all have different ideologies and everything else. And if everything was ascribed and agreed with all of our very ideas, it could really mean anything.
Great.
It's just the reality. And so everything is not, the reality of education is not going to align 100% in every instance with everything we individually.
Right, and I believe that, and I believe this just snowballed, and more was going to
So,
stop bigger.
so my goal is to try to stop it from snowballing even further.
Right.
And to rectify it so we can make this turn us around. I do not want this community, and I do not want these kids to walk away, and although maybe it's the unintentional lesson that conversation about race, and when we touch with that, it makes the whole community explode. What does it say? I don't want them to be that. Because kids, there's this fallacy, it's almost like in kindergarten. I can remember, I have 2 African-American young men. My children are now in college students, both of them are college students. I can remember that I was with my boys and they were in preschool. And they had, they were really excited and we went to a presentation that they had, an open house, and their preschool teacher, they went to Montessori School in Philadelphia, their teacher had brought her son, and her son was playing with my boys, and I leaned down and I was talking to all of them, and she's young white female, and her son turned to his mother and she said, Mommy, Jolene Jordan's mom is pretty and she's black. And the teacher was mortified. And she started apologizing to me. And I said, why are you apologizing? And she said, I don't want to offend you. I said, the idea, the premise of colorblind and not noticing it is a fallacy. I am black. Now I'm not black in skin, but if you understand the racial identification, then when we start talking about anything regards to race, he's not going to be able to address it properly because he's been shamed somewhere in the messaging, even in her apology because she thought she was doing it correctly. My goal with her was to not feel, and this young boy to feel like identifying me as an African American woman was wrong. I don't want that to be the case for these kids. I don't want them to become in a space where this conversation is so loaded because the conversation is in the ether that they never want to address. And I don't want another teacher in this school community to say, I don't want to touch it because you saw what happened this way. We don't want to send that message. We would do our kids a disservice. And we can figure out how to massage it and mitigate it so this is done that makes this community feel comfortable about the competency of the teacher and the way in which it's being handled, that we are assuaging all of the fears, but we cannot send this kind of message. And I'm here to help them. I'm here to help everyone kind of move through this space. Is there anybody have any questions? I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. When we had a town hall, I was a little upset about the vote originally, but then in the town hall, we were told that it would open up dialogue and there would be conversations. I keep hearing the word conversation, and I know it's important to have these conversations. And I do want my son to learn about racism, and I want him to have empathy and all of that. But there have been a few times since the vote has gotten started that he's had some feelings and things he disagrees with. And so, of course, we're home, and so he's calling me on the phone, and he's saying, Mom, I feel this way, and I feel this way, and I don't agree with this. And I told him several times, then you need to tell your teachers, because this is a conversation that we're supposed to be having. But he then tells me that he won't say that. He won't go against what she's trying to teach them, because he doesn't want her to be upset with him. And he doesn't want to cause any waves with his classmates, and he doesn't want to be ridiculed for disagreeing with some of his voting views. So my problem is that's not opening up the conversation. And so I feel like
him to feel that he can speak his opinion.
but I think that at 13 years old, these children are not mature enough to be that kid that's going against the narrative that's being portrayed.
But it's not being the narrative being portrayed. See, I think there's two things that are going on, and I hear what you're saying, right? It might be the first time that he's actually, there's a connection that he's feeling with people, and that's what conversations, this is why I call them difficult conversations or great conversations, because oftentimes when we work like this, we are confronted with our own feelings and opinions about things that, yeah, and you're correct. At first, you might not be equipped yet, but this is a part of the process of getting equipped. So maybe the support structure or the systems are not about the ideas that getting into a space that people feel comfortable, and maybe it's an increase in lesson plan design or conversations that are done or an activity that is more like a Socratic circle where people can feel comfortable about expressing their opinions without feeling they're going against the teacher. There's also a shift, I think, for a lot of students around that age anyway, about seeing their teachers as the automatic authority in everything. So there's a lot of dynamics I think I'm hearing from what you're saying. I am certain there's written words. There's a lot of things in which you could probably assert that space and be able to say it. I don't know, and being in this grade class with a student, she doesn't strike me as one that would say that she is not going to be willing to listen to him. I understand maybe his comfort, but I think that some of that we have to navigate with our kids to be able to give them that space, because that's how they become critical thinkers. That's how they become debaters. Speaking and listening, all of these ELA skills that are also being aligned with the teaching of this book. So we are talking about the standards that we are reinforcing for the kids. Standards they're going to need to be successful in Eastern, in their postgraduate life, so they're learning them as we go. And that is a part of actually look at her lessons. A lot of these conversations and lessons that she's drafting are trying to reinforce that. Is that still what you're talking about right now? like this would bring them over.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
I have worked here, and I am home away right now. With what is going on in this world, and being home with them all day, I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, seriously, this is the
I am struggling with having to pull them up and to keep them busy and to keep them from fighting and to keep them happy. My oldest just quit her favorite thing that she's done for years because, I don't know, she's depressed or I don't know what's going on. I just feel like this is a terrible time to introduce something that could trigger so much emotion in these kids. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying right now, I can't think of a worse time in the world with what we are going through. We just went through the most controversial time, one of the most insane elections that we've ever been through as a nation. I mean, this is just, I can't think of a worse time to introduce something so high stress on these families and on my children.
But you can't, you know, at this point, it's the struggle about how books and stuff and how they're taught are the struggle and what's going on. In actuality, the times right now are probably the richest times for students to even understand the connection. I do understand that.
Actually, I disagree completely. I think
It's
that,
not, and I'm okay with that.
I just think that there's a better time. We could have pulled off maybe even in the spring, we would have pulled off. But right now, while
We have
we
no
have
idea
one
when
time,
I might feel it's up in spring.
I'm sorry.
See, we don't have no idea when might be coming in the spring. See, there's never a good time to choose, and that's the some of this, the reality is that we always want to choose what we find might be the opportune time.
So why now though? Is there a reason for why now? Like why did we just
Because
always
we
decide
already set the
right now?
schedule. You can't, you don't make course selections and then say, you know what, the world is, I feel like this is conducive right now for the teaching. Whatever the school district or whatever they said, whatever they have set in regard to the curriculum for the year, already kind of aligned with where the books were going to be selected and read. There's no district that says, you know what, I think this is the bad time, we're going to pull this one and move it to whatever. Most teachers use current events to actually push into the curriculum because it creates a system where kids are able to see connection to self, connection to world, connection to community. It as a value added. Truthfully, it might feel heavy for us, but if we use this correctly, this will actually make a more strengthened, teachable moment. And I understand the emotional part first as adults.
So you think it's also something that would be more beneficial if we were together in person? Like I feel like we're losing tone and we're losing so much by being online.
I don't know if you guys are with them on this, and I don't know if I don't know whether or not you're sitting with them through every lesson, for every conversation, through whatever. But if I can be quite honest, I know even with my kids, when they go home and doing remote learning, I'm in and out. So I'm not going to miss something that was very crucial to the body of the lesson that was said, that could set a completely different tone about the lesson. So if I'm walking into it, I don't know what they missed. And so there's a lot of assumptions. I mean, the only way you can say that your child is missing all of that is if you're saying that you got a test for something in which they're reflecting on writing back that was not able to properly assess that. Has a grade come out that it's assessing whether or not is that been measured on some sort of assessment tool, or is that opinion? And you have a right to your opinion. But is that an actuality, or is that how you do it?
Dr. Harris, I'm going to ask you to take I think we have two questions. Mr. Ballack had his hand up, and then there's one in the back, and then that would be the conclusion. No, you're fine. You're fine.
Just to follow up with the indication about how this is a very stressful time. I completely agree. This is not a normal year. No one can say this is a normal year. This hasn't been anything like we've experienced in the 100 years or anything. No one alive has experienced what is going on in the past 6 months. And I agree completely. I mean, my family, my kids, everyone is completely stressed out. Teachers are stressed out. Every parent's stressed out, or politicians are stressed out. This is not the appropriate time. And quite frankly, everything that I've heard, I respect everything you're saying, but a lot of it is being coming across to me, very preachy. I think you were over talking to the board member when she was trying to express her views. You're over talking to the parents when they're trying to express their views. And we're just being told that we're wrong and that our feelings don't matter. And we got to accept this because this is the law that the state has adopted. I don't agree with it. There's other parts in the law that I agree with. But the Marxism, socialism, and those aspects of it, saying this is what is good, this is the ideology to follow, those aspects is good, but then all the founding principles of our country are bad, I disagree with that. And this is what I mean, I'm getting told I'm wrong.
I'm not trying to ask you to show me in proof that the book said if the founding principles of our country are bad. You didn't have a principle, I would like to see that. What I saw in the book, what I read in the book a number of times, is that it was giving, that there is a novelty of certain ideas about the founding. Can you show me in the book where they said it was founding principles that they were trying to do?
Yes, I have a lot of different examples throughout the book, where I talk about Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, says all of them were bad, they were racist. Yes, that Christianity and the Puritans were who created racism and brought racism to our country. But then we have Angela Davis, the Black Panthers, and the BLM were all inspirational. That's my problem when we're talking about that. And, well, again, this is why I'm not here to debate the book with you. I'm saying,
I'm not debating, I'm saying you're making very broad statements.
Entity.
So you're saying that the sentence said Abraham Lincoln is back. George Washington is back.
Ronald Reagan, all of them. And in the original book, we talked about the Klan members that voted for Donald Trump, that the biggest that voted for Donald Trump. All of that is where...
Our students are not reading the original text.
That's what I said, the original book. I didn't say...
Yeah, they're reading the remix. So I just want to make sure that the record reflects that. Our students are reading the remix version.
Again, this is just a feeling that I think a lot of the parents are having, is that we're just being dismissed and we're being told, you got to do this and this is what it is, and we have no input. But this is a very stressful time and it should have been held off for a while. Excuse me? I can't hear you.
See, most adults say stuff like this happening. Most of us can't do that the way we say.
We're getting way off topic.
I'm not getting off topic, but I'm saying to you, sir, we have an example. This is that we know there are opinions or whatever, we're not getting off course. But there are doctrines that do, there are people that, and they start, if you saw that in there, I am not beginning that with those sentences specifically were there. Now, it might be how you feel and read the sentence, but I am sure that number did not write the sentence that Abraham Lincoln said.
He did say black and bad with him, that you know, the son of him would be black and bad, and that affects his way.
He also said that that was a mythology about the creation of race. He did not say that he believed it. He was sending a video of historiography of some of the ideas about the creation of race. And actually, that was a pretty powerful feeling. That was not something you should make up.
And this is something that my son is telling me, so if adults can't pick up on the irony that these things are used, what makes you think that these children are picking up on it? And maybe Mrs. Gray is not getting that across to them. That's how
So
they
did
pick up
you
on it.
talk to her about that?
She doesn't reply to emails, no. We haven't talked to her about anything, and she dismisses all of it. That's the problem I have. I've been dismissed over and over, to the point that my emails start turning nasty because I'm frustrated. It didn't have to go this way. It didn't. No, and I'm not, I wouldn't have told you, you're the one that's here.
I will teach you that Mrs. Gray, in partnership with me, she was very clear about wanting to make sure that she provided clarity and all of these issues. She's sharing with me. But I'm not saying, so I think you think that she was thinking him, she was potentially committed to that. She's also, at this point,
I'm going to have to pop on to the next Zoom that my son is on to actually talk to her, because that seems to be the only way to make her. Which I don't think that's appropriate either.
It's not. I'm going to ask you to please not do that and to defer to the administrator. Mrs. Walson is in the back, and I'm sure she can take your question on that. I do want to ask Dr. Harris if you could just take the last question from the gentleman in the back.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I think that, in fact, this is a great time for it.
I'm sorry, just before you start, could you just state your name for us?
Yeah, my name is
First and last.
Say Ken Lundy.
Okay, thank you.
I think that this is the perfect time for this because it's a privilege to be able to not read the book to escape these issues. If that makes them go away, then we're in a good place personally, you know, and the issues exist and they're ever present and, you know, there's a lot of people who can't just not read about it and have that not be something to be concerned about. And so I do think it's an important thing to read right now, and also I do think that this is something that would be planned for well in advance of the issues of the world, and just changing around the curriculum is certainly not something that would be a best practice because things got complicated in the world. And again, I still think the conversation is extremely necessary. And it's the global readout, it's the read across America, because a lot of other places think so too. And the nuance of the book, this is a young adult book intended for this audience. And lastly, having read the study guide and also the book, the questions in the study guide which have already been dealt with are from the book. So my concern is that if you're concerned with the topic of the study guide, which is drawn directly from the content of the book, then you're really having an issue with the book.
Thank you. We're going to move along with our agenda. I do thank you, Dr. Harris, for your time, for coming out tonight and for speaking with us and for engaging in a difficult dialogue and taking questions and providing answers. Thank you. So under new business, our next board meeting, the date is being changed to December 16th at 7 p.m. rather than December 23rd. We have nothing listed under old business unless someone, yep.
No, I guess technically it's new business. I just have a follow-up to Dr. Harris, if I may, just for a few minutes. Dr. Harris, thank you so much for coming out this evening. I know it's late. We certainly appreciate your opposing view, if you will, and actually I do appreciate the community as well. I think we all do. I think it's a very good thing to have this discourse, whether it be in support of one thing or an opposing view. I think, again, that discourse is the most important thing for us, okay? So for those that don't know, I'm a member of the curriculum committee. I'm also the chair of the policy committee. So I personally am sort of in depth with this particular topic. I say with great pride that this district is meeting the highest expectations for academic achievement. My daughter entered the school district this year as a kindergartner. Obviously entering in the middle of COVID crisis and working generally remotely is not the way that I wanted her to start any part of her academic career, but it is what it is. And I am very excited and happy that she is here, as I'm sure you are as well, okay? So a primary goal really of this board and of this district is to educate on a basis of empathy. As our country grapples with a turbulent history, to say the least. My background is in education. I was a social studies and social science teacher for over 10 years. I taught those textbooks that we mentioned before, and I know first and foremost that a lot of that is basically the same viewpoint, sort of written over and over and over throughout the years. Additionally, BCS continues to fine-tune our curricula to prepare and align for the educational requirements of both Eastern High School and beyond. In this community learning environment, I'm proud to say that our students are encouraged to learn and grow together, no matter how hard that discussion may be. In the midst of our global pandemic, it's really important to try to maintain a sense of normalcy and yet challenge our students whenever possible. They deserve an opportunity to explore their changing viewpoint and to empathize with situations that may not reflect on their own. It makes them better people overall, in my opinion. As such, BCS is proud to focus on a path of education through both diversity, equality, and inclusion. Our staff demonstrates the highest level of acceptance, and our students learn open-minded processes. At times, these processes require discussing difficult topics, and we hope to do it in a safe and welcoming environment whenever possible. Questions will form naturally, and although the topics may be uncomfortable at first, or throughout the entire unit, it can lead to a deeper and more powerful understanding of who those students are. And again, I'm very proud of saying so. Now, it's my personal belief that learning a variety of viewpoints creates a more well-rounded and honorable outcome. Critically thinking students develop a natural empathy for those around them. It doesn't matter what skin color you are, what religious backgrounds you have, what your cultural background might be, sexual orientation or anything like that. That's a very important outlook for them. This allows students to understand all sides of a position and decide for themselves what is right. Unfortunately, only a few recurring viewpoints have been explored over the past 100 years, and going from my historical background. It is my opinion, my personal opinion, that Stamped is an example of an opposing view, and I think that is one that is perhaps welcomed in many districts outside of ours, and again, Dr. Harris hinted to that throughout the state of New Jersey. I don't believe that it is ever appropriate to use terms such as brainwashing or indoctrination when discussing age-appropriate, albeit difficult topics, simply because they may not align with your own beliefs. Again, my daughter is still very young. I somewhat look forward to the years where she tells me no and wants to fight me on my own personal beliefs. I think that'll be a very good thing for her, and I certainly welcome that as well. In this case, slavery is a current, factual, and very systemic reality from what I can see, over 45 million people around the globe, even in the year 2020. It has directly shaped America and our history in really more than any other social or cultural influence, as far as I can tell, from the formation of Jamestown in Virginia in 1607. It is perhaps the most powerful change that we've ever seen in our country. But in order to move forward, this community must look introspectively. Each and every one of us, whether it's here on the board, administration of the school, parents, community leaders, and everyone else, we have to examine our own natural biases, give our children the tools they need to discover the world for themselves. Demanding that a historical or literary resource be removed, whether it be out of your own fear, confusion, political lean, biased view, it just limits the growth of all students. I take great pride in asking our students to think for themselves, to develop critical thinking skills, and evolve into well-educated and accepting young adults. And I certainly hope that you do as well. It may not happen this evening, it may not happen this school year, but I think as we push on, as we push forward with, again, our basis of equality and inclusion, that diversity, as it says on the wall just over there, we are all individuals working together. And again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anything else under new business? I know that there was a comment, Janine, earlier about a curriculum supervisor. So I would like to ask for a curriculum and instruction and possibly personnel. Dr. Campisi, if you could add that to next month's agenda for a curriculum supervisor to look into that. Do we have anything under old business? I would be remiss if I didn't just comment, I'm sorry. I am the descendant of an enslaved person. My grandfather was born in 1869. Yes, he was 70 when my father was born. So he was born 4 years after the abolishment of slavery. I am not a victim of my circumstances. It does not identify who I am. And I hope that your children enjoy the text, that they engage in rich and robust discussions with one another. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve on this board. I'm proud of the work that we are doing here tonight. At this time, I need a motion and second to go into non-public executive session where we will be discussing personnel. There will be no action taken at the conclusion of that non-public executive session. So if you'd like to leave, you're certainly able to do so. A motion and second, please, for non-public executive session.
Motion.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Thank you.